Hello everybody, good afternoon or good morning depending on where you're based in the world. So welcome to today's webinar, which is Business Intelligence Development using SQL Developer Tools. In this webinar today, which is going to consist mostly of software demonstrations, which will probably last about 30 minutes, followed by around 30 minutes of Q&A, we will see how you can use SQL Developer Tools to build business intelligence applications. My name is Michael Francis and I work here in the SQL Source division at Redgate Software. So before I hand over to today's presenters, who are Naomi Marino, who's a business intelligence developer at Redgate Software, and Tom Austin, who's in the SQL Tools division, also at Redgate Software, there is a small housekeeping item to explain. So in order to provide a clear audio line, everybody's going to be on mute until the end for the whole presentation. However, we do welcome all questions, so if you do have a question, please type it into your GoToMeeting panel, and then at the end of the software demonstrations, we will read out all of the questions and answer them accordingly. So just to reiterate, we do welcome all questions, so please do type them into the GoToMeeting panel. So with no further ado, I'm now going to hand over to Tom and Naomi, who will show you some with business intelligence applications.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Michael. Hi, Naomi. For a while now, we've been thinking a lot about business intelligence development and how we can do something to help BI developers, as we do for our SQL developers. And when we had the opportunity to present the webinar to you today, we thought this would be a perfect opportunity to explore this area a little bit further and see what some of the options are. So when it comes to business intelligence development on a Microsoft platform, the toolset is reasonably limited. This is not to say that it's a poor toolset, it's just that we've come to the point where we accept what is available and have to get on with what we have to get done. The typical business intelligence developer will make use of BIDS, Business Intelligence Development Studio, for their day-to-day work, but we don't feel that the software to support this role should stop there. In fact, we feel that there are numerous areas where the benefits traditionally enjoyed by SQL developers could be applied to a business intelligence field. And today what we're going to do is look through a bit of an example of a typical BI task. So in this case, it's actually going to be a new ETL task, and see how we can apply some of those tools actually to this methodology, to this way of working, and how we can help the BI developers. So Naomi, do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're actually going to be doing today?
Yes. Hi, Tom. So thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to be covering a small, a very simple BI task that will create a small data mart. So basically we'll gather the information from the database and move it into a small data warehouse, or would be outside of the scope of this presentation, but eventually we'll build a cube on top of that data mart. Now, before we continue with the example, a few things that I would like to mention as notes. So, for example, we will be using the star schema approach. I know that some people are very in favor of the Snowflake approach, but for this example, we'll use the star schema, and also we'll be using the Adventure Web database as our staging database. Now, let's see what I mean by those two things. The first one is, I know that there is a whole debate about which of the two approaches are better. I guess it all depends. You can have a star schema, you can have a Snowflake schema, you can have hybrids or mix and match. It depends what the data you have and what how you want to move forward into the future, how you want to maintain it in the SQL layer, or you want to maintain it in the analysis services layer. So, and as you know, the BI system, so we have a lot of different sources. I don't know if you can see my mouse, I hope you do, but if not, on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see all of the different data sources. We could have MySQL, we could have Oracle, we could have flat files, we could have Excel files, and normally we would use, I've lost my mouse, we would use an integration services pack, which would take that information that comes from those data sources into our staging database. Now, in our staging database, normally we'll have all of the data but coming straight away from the other one, so we would have no format. It would not be in the format that we needed for our cubes. And the reason for that is that we may have different times during the day that that data comes in. It could be, some of them can come every 5 minutes, some of them could come every month, some of them could come from a web service. So to avoid collashing on the data coming in at different speeds. That's what we have the staging. Now, to move it to the data warehouse, again, we use an integration services package, and then we transform it into that data mart that our cube is going to be sitting on top. Now, oops, sorry, a lot of pages in here. Now, for our example, so on our example, the first thing we need to do is we go down to our customers and our clients or our boss, line manager, whoever needs some analytical information to be available. The first thing we ask them is what information they would like to see and how they would like to slice that information. So in the example today, we're going to build that data mart that covers the total amount of money made in orders, the number of orders and the number of items in order, and then also would like to be able to slice that information by the shipping country, the date where when the order was placed, the product category, the product salespeople, and the sales territory. So now, having that information, we're ready to start our example. So, Tom, I think you can enlighten us with the next step we need to take. Hello? Ooh, Tom is gone. Tom. Well, very nice. I think Tom is gone, so I'm going to be doing his part. I don't know where he's gone. Sorry. So what we'll see today, we're going to cover 5 different areas: discoverability, versioning, coding, visibility, and deployment. In this particular section, sorry, this part normally Tom is the one that will cover those. So.
Hey Naomi, I'm back now.
Oh, there you go. Hello, Tom.
Sorry, a temporary loss of connection there. So I'm not sure how much of it I missed, but it was certainly great to see exactly what we were looking at.
So at the moment, we were looking at the summary. I mean, the things that we're going to see today, the discoverability. I was attempting to explain that, but I'm not as good as you are, Tom.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thanks for helping me out until I was back online there. So as Naomi started telling you, there's really 5 main areas that we hope to show you that SQL developer tools can be of benefit to BI developers. These are discoverability, versioning, coding, visibility, and deployment. So we'll go through these one by one and see a little bit more about exactly what we mean by this. So let's start off at the top with discoverability. So by this we mean actually being able to discover the way information is linked in our database. We need to be able to understand the objects in the database along with the relationships between them to be able to effectively create our solution. Now, with some databases, this can be achieved by simply reviewing the Object Explorer, but that's not always the case. In fact, when we got together and started putting together this presentation, we decided to use the AdventureWorks database, as we felt that this would be a reasonably familiar starting point and something that most people have had to play with or look at some point. But it was actually really tough to work our way through. And as we began to work through the example, we quickly discovered that AdventureWorks was not as clear as we had first expected, and in fact it was quite difficult to track foreign key relationships through the various tables to get to the information that we required. So what we needed was a way to get a quick overview of the database, and then after that to actually drill down into the actual relationships. And these are types of problems that actually we can address quite easily with one of our SQL developer tools, SQL Dependency Tracker. And also in some parts SQL Search as well, but for now we'll focus on SQL Dependency Tracker, which is a tool that allows us to graphically view our database and the objects and the relationships between them. So it makes it a great choice for, first of all, a high-level overview, and then to actually drill down into the actual relationships themselves. So, Naomi, do you want to show us how it works and take us right into the database?
Happy to. Thank you, Tom. Yes. So I'm going to move away from the presentation. I'm going to go to my PC. And the first thing I'm going to do, so as you know, in a business intelligence scenario, when you're trying to find out all of that information, you receive a lot of queries, a lot of tables. Some people tell you, oh yeah, I use this to find information, but at the end of the day, you end up having a whole set of queries, and you're not sure what tables they belong to, how's their relationship, what is the foreign key relation. So we're going to use Dependency Tracker to help us doing that. So the first thing that we need to do is add that project a project into our dependency, to dependency tracker. So let me just find the server that we are going to be using and the database. Now, one thing I would like to mention is that in this example, as you saw earlier in the matrix of the orders and dimensions, we're going to be looking at sales information. And so in this example here right now with the dependency tracker, I'm going to be going from the sales table to the dimension table, which is the country, the shipping country information. So let's start and see what I mean by that, because I know that the talking doesn't really help. So the first thing, I select the database, I select everything, I add into the project. Now I have some sort of visibility over all of the tables and objects available in my database. Now that's yes, very good. I can see the relation, but obviously that's not very useful. I can change the shape obviously to see if there's any more use on that. I can select the objects and see how they relate to each other. But then again, it's too much information in here. So what I'm going to do next, I know that I'm starting from the sales information, so I'm just going to type sales in here, and I find sales information. Now, in here on the right-hand side, I can see all of the objects that have something to do with the word sales. So I'm going to start from the sales order header table, because I know that that's the table where all of the sales information is, and I'm going to drive all of my way to the country information. So I've selected that table, so now I can invert that selection and remove from project, and then let me reapply the layout. Now I have my one and only table as a starting point. I can expand and see all of the columns that are available within that table, and obviously in here I can see now my ship to address. So most likely this is the relationship that is going to take me to the country. So then now I'm going to right click on this table, add to project, and object the selection uses. So now I can see all of the tables that are directly related to my sales order header. I can change the layout to something that is more useful. I can zoom in and zoom out. So in this case, I'm going to go for the hierarchical because that's the one I actually prefer. And I can see now start discovering the tables that I need for finding my country dimension table. So again, I've got customer, I know that that's not the one, credit card, address. So now this is the table I'm after to see if it actually takes me to the country information. So at least this one has state, province ID, which is more likely to take me there. So I'm going to select this one and the sales order header. I'm going to invert selection and remove from project. And as you can see, I could repeat this process over and over until I actually find the path to my table, my dimension table, and also I have the whole relationship between the tables to the sales order header. So obviously I did something from home, otherwise it would take a little bit longer. And if I go back here, I've already have my project done. And you can see all of the tables that are related in this example of today. And now the good thing about this is I can print this out. I know the table names. I know how they relate to each other. I know what tables, what columns. So I have the information to export the country table, but also I have all of the information that I need for the joins for my query that is going to build up the fact table in my data mart. So at this stage, I think I'm ready to move on, aren't we, Tom?
Yeah, it certainly looks that way to me. So, I mean, it's an excellent first step. We've already been able to get a head start on understanding the source database and been able to identify how to get to the data that we actually need for our application. So at this point, we need to make a decision on actually how we're going to implement our solution. In this case today, we're actually going to adopt a design methodology where we're going to try and store the logic on the SQL Server rather than as part of the BI package. So let's have a quick look at what we mean by this. When we're creating our BI package and we come to extract some data from one of our SQL sources, we have a number of different options on how we can actually do this. We can make use of a SQL table or a view, we can call a stored procedure, or we can actually embed a SQL command as part of that BI package. The key point in adopting our approach is to not use embedded SQL commands and instead make use of more stored procedures as part of the database to retrieve our information. The result of this means that all of the SQL logic is now stored on the SQL Server rather than being hidden away within the BI solution itself. The reason we do this is, well, there's quite a few reasons, but the overlying reason is the fact that it allows us to make more use of tools traditionally available to SQL developers that we can actually use to work with the SQL code in our BI application. So what are the benefits that this approach provides for us? Well, first of all, as with any developer worth their salt, really, we need to consider versioning, and we need to look at actually getting our object under source control. So once the logic is actually stored on the SQL Server, we can make use of Redgate's tools to provide source control to database developers. We can actually use those for our business intelligence objects. So source control is nothing new to application developers. It's something that's been around, for ages and ages. We're all aware of the benefits. It's something that's been more welcomed by database developers since the introduction of the SQL Source Control tool, which makes it much more easy to actually manipulate the source control system. And there's certainly no reason we see why this can't be passed on to business intelligence developers as well. So, so let's take a look at perhaps how we get this set up and started. Naomi, can we get started under source control?
Yes, we can, and we should. So I'm going to go back to Management Studio. Let me just close my my window. Okay, so back in Management Studio, the two databases that we're going to be using today is AdventureWorks BI, which is a copy of AdventureWorks that I'm going to be using for this project, and the other database which is going to play the role of the data warehouse and where the data mart is going to live is demo.dw. So the first thing, let's take this database and hook it up to source control. So we go to link database to source control. You have different options. I think recently we also have some other options. Is that correct? Yes. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to use evaluation. Please feel free to download the product and try it out. Again, it's free, so you can see if actually you can benefit from that. I'm going to use a dedicated database because I'm using my own copy. So I'm going to create my repository. I'm going to create that link, and now AdventureWorks BI is actually on source control. The same thing I'm going to do with demo.dw. So again, link database to source control. Again, I'm going to use the evaluation of option only, create new, and I'm going to use this repository, create, dedicated database. Again, it's my own personal copy before deployment. I link. Now my two databases are also hooked into source control. Now, as a starting point, if your database has never been into source control, or well, yeah, it's the first time, you probably need to commit all of the changes as a starting point from before you start your development. So that's what I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is actually commit my changes. So if I go commit changes to source control, all of the objects that are brand new in AdventureWorks BI, because before it wasn't in source control, are now here. So I'm just going to commit in here. Yeah. Oh, sorry. And now I commit my changes. Okay, now it's done. So now I'm ready in the database layer. I'm ready to actually start my work. The other thing that we also need to do, obviously, is open up this Business Intelligence Developer Studio and get our project into source control. In this case, we're not going to cover source control in Visual Studio, but obviously you will have already this type of tools available to you. So now I've got my project in Business Intelligence Development Studio ready. I've got my tables ready in source control. I think we're ready to start, Tom.
Fantastic. It's great to know that everything's now sort of tucked away and safe in source control. I mean, of course, there is to some degree some traditional methods of source control in your BI packages, but the trouble with that approach is they're very much all or nothing. You can either source control the package as a whole or not at all. So in this case, by actually using SQL Source Control, we're able to break that down into the individual components that are part of the SQL Server database. So each of our stored procedures that we're going to use later to extract the data is source controlled as a single entity, and we have a history for that object on its own. So that's really one of the reasons why this approach is much more beneficial And yeah, I think we're ready to move on. So I guess we've taken a look at discoverability. Obviously versioning we've just done. So the next on our list was coding. Now, Naomi reliably tells me that when it comes to writing SQL in bids, there's actually very little to help. So there's no IntelliSense, there's no dependencies suggested, nothing. But now that we're working within SQL Management Studio, because our logic is stored within the SQL Server, we actually have access to tools like SQL Prompt and SQL Search, which give us much more help when we're actually going ahead and writing our SQL. So we've got auto-completion, join condition creation, column pickers, column-level dependencies, and loads more. So I can't build these things, but Naomi, it's your job. Do you want to go ahead and get us started?
Yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome. If I go back, you see, I'm already ready to release, Tom. If I go to my PC, I'm still thinking about that pint you owe me from that last week. Anyway, so if we go back to our project, so the first thing we need to do is, and here what I'm going to cover is our path from, so basically we're going to export the dimension table, which is the country information. So how we do that? So the first thing we normally do is we come to Business Intelligence Studio, and we most likely will create a package that will contain the transformation. So I'm going to open up my toolbox and get the OLDB data source, and in here I need to select the table. Now in here my options are either I select the table. It could be an option if I already know what table. I have to actually browse through to find it. And you'll see as I go that I'm a little bit lazy developer, and I don't like to be browsing around 3 million tables until I find the one I need. But also I like sometimes to add some logic in my export information, in my export job, so I do some more some more logic afterwards. You'll see what I mean in a second. So the country information would be here. I think this is the one. I could do this one. I can also do SQL command and type here my query. So I could do select stuff or select whatever table. But as you can see, there is no IntelliSense in here. So I prefer to go to Management Studio, and I'm going to do it from here. So the first thing I'm going to do, write a query. But again, I need to know the table name. And I'm a lazy developer, so I'm going to take advantage of SQL Search. SQL Search will find the table for me. So I know it's country something, so I'm going to write country. All of the objects suddenly appear in here, so I'm going to filter by tables. Now I've got the country table that I was after. If I double click on it, automatically get selected in my Object Explorer. Now I can do select of thousands, and I've got my table. For this particular scenario, I'm going to use our business case has decided that we don't care if the country gets changed over time. So if the country gets changed, we're going to update it. So for that, I'm going to get rid of all of these comments. I'm going to remove the top 1,000, and I'm going to add in here a way of detecting that that row has changed. So I'm going to use checksum because I can use the logic I can use the logic back in SQL Server and it's stored in here. So I'm going to use country name region code, and I can also use name. You might not notice, but this is SQL Prompt, another of our products that can help you type the queries as you go. You will find it very useful, but I'm about to show you the best feature ever. You'll love this one. So if I go name, and then I'm going to call this as hash. Now I've got my query. If I run it, I've got some, I think that's a mistake. So I run this, it runs fine, but I need it to look just perfect. And this, you wouldn't believe how useful it is, this format SQL, every single time that you need to read SQL. But anyway, we have the query. It's returning the information I needed to it needs to return. So I have the option of typing it in here. If I did this, it's a perfect valid option. The problem is that no one knows that I'm using that table here. No one knows that I'm querying or manipulating anything here. So the best approach is actually creating an source box. So now I'm going to take advantage again of SQL Prompt and encapsulate this as new store procedure. Now before I do that, I need to do some preparation. So if you bear with me for a second while I create the schemas and some store props for our scenario. Just bear with me for a second, please. This is so that we have a schema roles and we can differentiate the security levels on our example. So let me just run this. 1, 2, 3, done. Okay. So can I move this away? So I'm just going to close that up. So now I'm all ready. So I'm going to create, SQL Prompt. So again, I select the query, SQL Prompt, encapsulate this as a new stored procedure. The schema is cubed, so it's easy detectable in our Adventure Work database. And then if we go into USP get country, and that's the name of the stored procedure, I click next, view script, now it's there. I can now select the correct database. I create the stored procedure. I can execute and, I can see that it returns the information I wanted to return, and now I can put that stored procedure in here. When I do that, I can see that it returns the information. I've got the information there, but in the other hand, if I go back in here, I already see that my stored procedure is in source control and it's being modified, so there are changes pending for committing. I also have the other changes that I did just to prepare for this example. So now if we continue in here, so the next step, this one obviously is get countries. The next thing would be to do a lookup. So I'm going to do a lookup in the destination table. So on the source table, we'll have the country information. On the destination table, we'll have also the hash information. So we're going to do a lookup. So this one will redirect to no match output. Connections is going to be the demo database, and obviously it doesn't exist the table yet, so we're going to create it. In this case, it's going to be called geo.country. So I've got the table. Now it's going to give me an error because it cannot select it, but that's perfectly fine. That's the joy of BIDS. Now I've got geo country selected in here, and now I'm going to map these two. The primary key of the table in here, and I'm going to export this one out, and I'm going to call this one as old. Now, on the next step, I'm going to say, okay, if you don't find on this destination table the row, this particular country basically, I want you to insert brand new. So we're going to go and insert no match directly into the table. So no match output into the table, and in here we're going to select from demo data warehouse. And in this case, because it's a very small table, I'm just going to select the table. But you could use an insert a stored procedure where you could do some other logic in there, make sure that the mappings are correct. So now in here is insert new. And now the next one, we need a conditional split. So now if I select the conditional split, the two things that we need to do is, if it has been modified, updated. If it hasn't been modified, then do nothing. So we put the match in here and select columns, and we're going to compare the hash that is already on the table with the hash, the hash that is already on the table with the one that is coming from the data flow. So this is checked equal, and it is not equal, it's not equal. Okay, so now we have the two outputs available in there. So I'm going to use the trash destination, which is available for free by SQL List. It's very handy if you're trying to debug the where the data is actually going through the different paths. It's very handy if you have if you have nothing to do, also to have some destination that data actually goes to. So if the checksum is equal, it's going to do nothing. It's going to go to trash. But if not, we're going to run an update command. So if I do this, I link the conditional split to here. As you may know, if you run an OLSDB command before, you select destination, but when you come in here, you have the most beautiful SQL command intelligence that you could ever experience, which is this. And as you can see, there is no help, nothing to aid you in here. So again, you can write your update command in here and say, I want to update in my demo something in here. Or you can use the stored procedure. Again, I've brought some of that stuff already made from home, so just bear with me. I'm just going to create that. This is not the correct one. Sure. Sorry, bear with me. Ah, it's already created. Sorry. Sorry for the quick changing of the screens. I know that can be confusing when you're promoting. So I'm going to go to programmability, store procedures, and this is the update country. So I've created that already in my preparation script. So if I just use the update command, if I go back to my project in Business Intelligence Studio, and I use the command straight away in here, I have to put question marks. So that means that when I go to the column mapping, all I have is param 0, param 1, and param 2, which is, as you might agree, not very useful if you have like 15 or 30 columns to be mapping. So for this matter, I'm going to use the sort procedure. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put it in the command. So it's 1, 2, and 3. So it's 3 parameters. I go to column mapping, and at least now I have the names that I can map on. I can map, obviously, through this, or I can map in here. I know that you still have to map one by one, but I'm sure you can agree that it's much better doing it this way than actually doing the params. Now, I've got in here update row. So now I've got finished my little component here. So if I now execute this task, I should see all of the rows going straight away to here, which I do, because they didn't exist in the destination yet. If I run this again, all of the rows should go to the task destination because nothing has changed. If I go back to my Management Studio and I go to Adventure Web, again, you know, I'm lazy. Let's find the country. Country and Adventure Web BI. There you go. So I double click, and I'm going to edit the top 100, and I'm going to change Andorra for Andorra República. They might get, sorry if there is anyone from Andorra here. It's not in service. Apologize in advance. So now I've changed the name of the country. If I change that and I go back to my Development Studio project, I execute the task again, I should see 1 coming down this task. So I've tested all of the possible paths in my package. I know everything is running as I expect. So now I've finished programming everything I need for my little project. Obviously, I've got the rest of things here. I'm sorry it's not quite working because I didn't refresh it before, but you see the purpose of having this here. Now, if I go back to Management Studio, I can now commit my changes into Source Control. So I'm just going to close a few windows so it's not too confusing. Bear with me for a second. Close, there we go. So now if I can do it through the window in here, but normally we'll go in here and commit changes to Source Control. Now for all of my store procedures, I've got my schema declared here. So I think I'm ready to release. So I'm going to put ready for release. So I commit my changes for Adventure Web. This is done. And I do the equivalent for Demo Data Warehouse. So I'm going to go and commit changes to Source Control. And I'm ready for release. Yay! Commit. So I've got my package ready. I've got all of my data changes already into Source Control. I think I'm ready for release because I finished the bit that I needed to do. What do you think, Tom? I think I've finished?
Well, I'd like to agree with you. Yes, it's great. We've got all the logic in place, so super. And yes, it would be lovely to come and have a beer with you. But I'm just wondering, I mean, we've touched on visibility a little bit. But at this point, what pops into my head is what would happen now, though, if a SQL developer came along and decided to make a change to one of your objects, say the countries table, and change one of the columns, perhaps country name or something. Where would that leave you? Surely that would break your package. How would you be able to see what had happened?
So that would make me very unhappy, and I would go in panic mode. So I'm sure most of you that are hearing today have suffered from the problem that, you have your package, it's been running fine, your cubes process, everything refreshes as you expect, and then suddenly one day something breaks, and you spend hours trying to find what the hell has happened in the source database that made everything else to break. Now, again, that little panic button, I think I've pressed it in the past. The good thing about having source control is that you can see the changes. You can share your repositories with all the SQL developers. So if when they change columns or objects or any details in the source database, they're already aware that your stored procedure is there. So if I go back, sorry, I'm just going to show you what I mean, sorry. So if we go back in here, if I made a change, if a developer made a change in this database and committed it, then we would be able to see it straight away in here because everything is in source control. So including my stored procedures here. So they would be able to tell that by looking at the dependencies, they will be able to tell that some other application is actually calling in here, and I would be able to identify that change much easier, much faster than I would have done otherwise, I think. What do you think, Tom? Do you think that that's right?
Okay, so it makes it quite a lot clearer then for first of all, I guess the SQL developers to see your objects because they're stored on the SQL Server, but because you're using SQL Source Control, you can actually see the changes that developers make to the objects as well. So it works both ways, I guess.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay, super. Okay then. Well, in that case, I guess I can't not agree with you. It's time for release. So traditionally this point is perhaps one of the more tedious parts where it's quite a manual, laborious process where we have to get all of our scripts ready, check all the changes that we've made, make sure we've got the creation scripts for all those new objects that Naomi's just created, pass those on to release team, and really it's just very time consuming. Now if any of you out there are familiar with Redgate, I'm sure you've seen our SQL Compare tool before, but SQL Compare really makes this so simple that it's just a matter of a few clicks. We can actually use the tool to compare our target and our source and create the scripts that we need to pass on to our release team. So Naomi, do you want to go ahead and finish up and create those scripts?
So this is the easy part, and so now we've made our changes, they are in source control. The next thing we can do, we just want to script our changes and deploy them and give them either to the test team or to the deployment team. So if I right click in here, I can actually get a schema compare deployed, and I'm going to set this one as the source database because obviously this copy here contains my changes, the ones that I've made. And in the other end, I'm going to drag and drop on Ventureware. But in this case, I'm actually going to choose the first commit that we did initially, you saw at the very beginning of the presentation. So in here, I'm going to commit to that, to compare to this one. Why am I comparing to this one? Because this is, let's assume that this one is actually the production version, the version that's currently running on our production service. So we're going to go to compare and deploy with SQL Compare. And now the program opens. And I'm going to compare them now. I click OK. Now in this window, I can see 148 objects have not changed. And in here are my 7 objects that have changed. So all I have to do, I can click on them. I can see in here what they look like, what each stored procedure is. I can see if they look like what I would expect from my release. But also I can then use my synchronization wizard and click next, and now have all of the scripts for creating all of the stored procedures and schema and anything that you have modified for this particular release in one go. So I can save this script. I can save this script to a file, and I don't know. Let's call it. Sorry, wrong folder. So I'm just going to call it. I don't know, release version. I don't know, version. Okay. Changes. Okay, so now I've saved it there. I could open it straight away from here to the script editor. Unfortunately, even though I just did that, my computer is a bit upset with SQL Server and different versions. So apologize for that. I've been trialing things. So. But basically, you would have in here your your script that you can actually modify if you needed to, but basically all of your changes are now available in here. You're ready for release, very simple, in like 3 steps, and you're ready to go. So we're ready to release and ready to for that kind. Tom.
Well, I mean, that's fantastic. We've seen right from the initial investigation all the way through to the final deployment, and we've had help at every step of the way. So we've had database and object discovery using SQL Dependency Tracker and SQL Search. We've been able to safeguard our work using SQL Source Control. SQL Prompt and SQL Search have assisted us in actually creating our package, creating the SQL code required for our package, and visibility as a whole has been improved by storing that logic on the SQL Server and by use of SQL Source Control. And then finally, as we just saw, the scripts for deployment have been created using SQL Compare in just a few steps. So that really covers our 5 areas: discoverability, versioning, coding, visibility, and deployment. And all of the tools that we've used today are actually available as part of the SQL Developer Bundle. For all of you who have attended this webinar today, thanks very much for your time. We do have a special offer for you, so if you contact Michael Christofides, his email address is on the screen there, and quote the code BIWebinar April 11, we can actually offer you a $200 discount off of the license of our SQL Developer Bundle. But in the meantime, if you'd like to go ahead and download the free trials, you can do. Please head over to redgate.com, where you can get a 14-day trial of all the tools. Our SQL Source Control tool, in fact, is a 28-day trial. So really that brings us to the end. Thanks again for your time. And if there's any questions, please do type them into the panel on your GoToMeeting applet there. And Michael, if you could read them out, and we'll see what people want to know.
Well, thank you very much, Tom and Naomi, for a brilliant demo there. So as Tom said, if you do have any questions, do please type them in. So now is the time where we're going to throw open the floor. So we have quite a few questions already. First one is from Paul Williams, who's asking, what if the tables in a database don't have PK-SK relationships? Can SQL Dependency Tracker match relationships based upon name or similar?
Tom, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. So I think in that instance, it would actually be more beneficial to us to use the approach that Naomi showed us using SQL Search to actually trace those relationships. Where the primary key foreign key relationships don't exist, then perhaps the method that we showed using SQL Dependency Tracker would not be good.
So I think we're losing it.
I'm sorry about that, everyone. We seem to have lost Tom again. When Tom's back, we can carry on with the answer to that one. So the next question is from Michael Sakouras, who's also asking about Dependency Tracker, asking if it would work if the source system was not SQL Server based. Also, in this case, you may stage the data without redefining the table relationships. Would this then be useful?
So Dependency Tracker is just working with SQL Server databases currently, and it's actually just a view, so kind of like a read-only, and it does use the primary key and foreign key relationships to graph out the dependencies between the tables. So this is actually a view into the current state of the database. You wouldn't be redefining relationships at this point.
Thank you, Stephanie. So the next question is from Robert Carlson, who's asking, again about SQL Dependency Tracker. Will it automatically connect the different tables as long as the key name between them is the same?
Good question. So again, it's using the foreign key relationships that are defined in the database to track the dependencies between the tables.
I mean, in that case, if there wasn't any relationship between the two tables, the only thing is the table name, I would suggest using SQL Search for finding all of the tables that actually use the same name in all of the columns if there is no relationship between them, and it's quite handy.
Thank you. And the next question from Gail Schiffer, who's asking, does source control include data? So yes, Gail, it does include static data. Next question from Gary Carty, who's asking if the webinar is going to be available as a recording. So yes, everybody who's registered today will be emailed a link to the recording. That should come out either tomorrow or the following day. Okay, and the next question from Andrew Jackson, who's asking, how about changes that drop or alter columns or require tables to be dropped and then recreated?
Thanks, Andrew. So in SQL Source Control, we are storing the creation script for each object, so you can see how the changes, how each object changes over time. So we have history at the database level, but we also have history at an object level. So when you get the latest version of SQL Source Control, or when you deploy those changes using SQL Compare, SQL Compare actually generates the alter script. So in most cases, it won't have to you drop your table. If the table needs to be dropped and recreated, the table data would actually be transferred alongside. There are a few situations that you may need to alter the script yourself. So for instance, if you wanted to add a not null column to a table and the table already has some records in it, you may need to insert some data into that, or you would need to provide a default value so that records that are already in that table get populated. We do warn you if you do change the data type, so let's say you're going from an int to a tiny int, we will give you a warning when you do the SQL comparison that could result in data loss. So you do get a warning for changes to your data types like that.
Thanks, Stephanie. Another question from Andrew Jackson is asking about SQL Compare. So Andrew is asking, how about changes that drop or alter columns or require tables to be dropped and then recreated?
So that's actually kind of the same answer, because SQL Source Control is using the SQL Compare engine behind the scenes. So anything that SQL Source Control is handling, SQL Compare will handle it the same way. So again, in SQL Compare, you get warnings if you're truncating, or you could truncate a column based on making a data type smaller. So if you're going from like a varchar 50 down to a varchar 25, you would get that warning.
Thank you. So we have a question about SQL Dependency Tracker, if it's available for download. So yes, if you go to redgate.com, there's a 14-day free trial on there that you can download. So next question is, sorry, I just skipped it there by mistake. What if the source database is SQL Server 2000 and SQL Search does not help when the relationships are not defined? I'm attempting to build a data warehouse in SQL 2008.
Very interesting question. I would really like to hear your thoughts on that. I've come across different ways of approaching that, a specific way of exporting information out of SQL 2000. If you could drop us an email, I mean, if you drop an email to Michael Christopoulos and then forward the question, I'll be happy to answer outside of the scope of this webinar. And I'd be very interested in hearing what your thoughts are in that area.
Thanks, Naomi. Next question from Vincent Staropoli, who's asking if you can specify project/subfolder within TFS when using SQL Source Control, or does the application use the database name for the project folder?
So yeah, in TFS you can set up any repository structure that you would like. It can have a project with subfolders, and then under that subfolder have a database folder. And then when you link your database to Source Control, you just specify the existing empty folder in TFS that you want to link to. So you can set up your structure however you would like in TFS, and then just link to that specific folder you're interested in putting your database schema and your static data under.
Thanks, Stephanie. So Andrew Jackson's asking again about SQL Compare. So sorry for the confusion earlier, Andrew. So he's asking about how about changes, this is regarding SQL Compare, that drop or alter columns or require tables to be dropped and then recreated.
Thanks, Andrew. Actually, I'd love to follow up with you on this after, because we're actually looking into a solution for this right now. So because SQL Compare is comparing the state of your database at 2 points, if you renamed a column, it would think that it's dropping and adding a new column. So we're actually currently designing how to resolve this. But again, you do have the ability to edit the synchronization script before you actually run it. So you need to be aware about what changes you're running, especially if it's a production database. If there was a way to go to a test server or a staging server before running it on your production database, would be what we would recommend.
Thanks, Stephanie. So the next question from Ganesh Murthy is asking, does Dependency Tracker help to fine-tune complex store procedures?
How Dependency Tracker helps to fine-tune? I think Dependency Tracker might not be actually the best tool for tuning complex store procedures. What Dependency Tracker would help you with is actually finding them and know the relationship between the tables and the different objects within the database. If you wanted to fine-tune complex store procedures, I would probably recommend all the tools that we might have. I don't know, SQL Prompt actually might be a way of making it more visible and actually more readable. It might help you detect things that you don't really want to be doing at that level. And then obviously you have tools that Microsoft offers, like Tuning Advisor, and perhaps Tuning Advisor, something along the lines. I mean, if you're having issues with a specific complex store procedure, we'll be happy to hear from it, and we might even be able to help you and try to tune it if you want.
Thanks, Naomi. Next question is again about SQL Compare from Juan Zavala, who's asking, when using SQL Compare, can you overwrite target objects from a source, especially if it's a staging database target?
So yeah, in SQL Compare, you can see the comparison results, and then you can specify which objects that you want to synchronize. So it's actually going to create an alter statement if you actually want it to completely get rid of something in the target. If it's in an existing source, then it would drop it. But if you, if the object actually did exist in the target, then it would generate an alter script. So it's going to push any of the changes in your source database and apply them to your target database. If you needed to get rid of something in your target database, then you would need to, if it wasn't in your source database, then it would actually drop it. But yeah, I think the whole idea behind SQL Compare is to be able to compare two databases and then synchronize. So anything that's defined in your source, be able to push that or migrate that up to a staging database.
Thanks, Stephanie. So Tom's back, and we were talking about the dependency tracker. So Tom, what if tables in a database don't have PK, FK relationships? Can SQL Dependency Tracker match relationships based upon name or similar?
So, I think we've kind of sort of covered this previously. I think Stephanie touched upon it. It's not something that SQL Dependency Tracker will be able to help you with, but by using different approaches, such as using things like SQL Search and looking at the actual columns of the different tables within the database, you can actually track through much more easily than actually doing it by hand and just trawling through each of the objects.
Thanks, Tom. And we have one more question asking about what source control systems that does SQL Source Control support. Do you want to get on, Stephanie? Or Tom?
Stephanie, go ahead.
Great. So we support Subversion, Team Foundation Server, Vault, and Vault Pro. We also support Bazaar, CVS, Git, Mercurial, and Perforce. We also, in our latest release, we have an option that you can integrate with any source control system that has a command line. We have already had some users set up command line integration with AccuRev. So if you are using a source control system that has a command line, you should be able to link to that system as well.
Thanks, Stephanie. And we just have one more question about how easy is SQL Source Control to evaluate?
Okay, so I think we saw within the demonstration there that SQL Source Control actually comes with a built-in evaluation repository option. So it's pretty much one of the easiest things to evaluate because you can actually just install it, not have to worry about setting up your own source control environment beforehand. Use the evaluation repository. You've got 28 days to see how it works for you, and then if you're keen, then you can worry about actually setting up the environment later.
Thanks, Tom. So that's all the questions we have at the moment. So just before we wrap up, if anyone has any more, please do type them in. Or if you think of one after the event, you can email us on the email address on the last slide, michael.christophides@redgate.com. But I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for attending today or if listening to the recording. And thank you to Tom and Naomi for a very good presentation and demo.
Thanks, Michael.
There's been some feedback, people are saying it's awesome. Oh, sorry, we have one more question from Andrew Jackson who's asking, does SQL Source Control support tasks in TFS?
So yes, actually TFS has a concept of work items. So work items could be stories or tasks or bugs. And in SQL Source Control, if you are doing a piece of work, so let's say there was a bug assigned to you that was a work item ID number 123, and it impacted, a stored procedure, so you had to make a change to the stored procedure. When you committed that, you could just say #A123 to associate that commit to that bug, or you could say #R123, which would resolve that particular work item, that bug, with the commit you changed. So it's a really great way to track, if there's bugs or if there's tasks, what changes to the code has to be made, and track that all within source control. So that's for Team Foundation Server, but also for Subversion, there's a way to link it to other bug tracking systems like Jira, and there's also in Vault Pro also has a similar concept of work items, and you can link specific database commits to those work items so you can track what changes needed to be done to fix those bugs.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Oh, sorry, one last question. Do you know if Source Control works with MKS Integrity Suite?
Thanks, Nicholas. Actually, that's one I haven't heard of, but again, if it has a command line, then you should be able to just specify a few parameters in a file that comes with SQL Source Control. So as long as it has a command line, then you should be able to link SQL Source Control with MKS. If you have any questions, please follow up with support@redgate.com afterwards, and they might be able to help with that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. So just to reiterate the next steps, if you're interested in investigating this further, so all the tools shown today are available in the SQL Developer Bundle. There's a $200 offer for everybody who either attended live or is viewing this recording. We do have more webinars coming up, so if you go to redgate.com under the SQL Source Control product, you'll see a list of all the forthcoming webinars. And also we have free trials of all of our tools, so they're fully functional. Most are 14 days and one or two are 28 days. Again, all available on the website. So thank you very much, everybody, and I hope to speak to you on a future webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.